Never trust a soap that can deliver devastation and a New Year's kiss in the same breath, because it is not aiming for realism. Nothing like a New Year's episode to remind everyone that this is a soap determined to weaponize both champagne and pathology reports in the same breath. The hour pivots from celebration to devastation with the finesse of a writer tossing darts at a bulletin board labeled Feelings, landing squarely on Anita's diagnosis and the family's collective freefall. Nicole is pushed into the familiar trap of being told to lead with her heart, which is touching in theory and brutally unhelpful in practice when pride, shock, and fear are doing the driving. The emotional centerpiece, Anita, Vernon, Nicole, and Danny, facing the unimaginable, lands because it is played straight and performed with enough conviction to make the melodrama feel earned rather than manufactured. The point is clear. This storyline exists to hurt, to educate, and to force the audience into that uncomfortable place where denial stops working. And yet, even tragedy cannot escape the show's compulsive need for logistical chaos. The timeline whiplash is the quiet villain here. On-screen, mammograms, ultrasounds, genetics, and treatment plans often compress into what looks like a long weekend, while real life stretches into weeks and months, depending on protocols and individual cases. The episode gestures toward genetic testing, and immediately, the rumor mill starts drafting family tree rewrites. Kat as someone's real daughter, Eva as someone else's, because nothing says coping like turning medical anxiety into a paternity roulette wheel. Still, if the show's goal is awareness, it succeeds most when it treats the subject with gravity and uses the moment to nudge viewers toward action. Schedule the mammogram, take the call, do the uncomfortable appointment. That public health subtext is one of the few things here that does not feel like a plot device. Of course, while the adults are busy processing trauma, Danny decides the urgent priority is notifying Bill before informing the daughters. A bold choice, considering she has just injured her husband and has not yet established what the daughters know, what they need, or whether anyone even carries the relevant genetic risk. The grown daughters are fully capable of telling their father themselves. Inserting Bill as the first call reads less like responsible co-parenting and more like reflexive damage control. It also irritates Andre, which is one of the more believable reactions in the episode. Support is not just standing beside someone, it is also quietly questioning why a man with a complicated stake in the family is being centered in a moment that should belong to the women who will live with the implications. The counter-argument is equally obvious. Bill does have a legitimate reason to know if the information could affect his daughters. The problem is not that he is told. The problem is that the show frames it as immediate triage rather than a conversation the family controls on its own terms. The episode does, however, deliver on its other favorite addiction, romance as emergency relief. Ted and Shanice finally cross the line into a kiss that is less tender confession and more decisive claim, the sort of come here moment designed to make the audience forget the oncology subplot for exactly 30 seconds. The timing is impeccable in the way only television can be. Cue the kiss, cue the inevitable interruption, cue Leslie arriving a beat too late, because nothing says seasonal closure like manufactured near misses. Ted's gradual return to stability is also signaled by the welcome detail that he will finally stop living in a hotel, an arrangement that has always felt less like a housing choice and more like a prolonged metaphor for avoidance. Meanwhile, the show continues to understand the importance of wardrobe as character exposition. Sharon's styling remains immaculate, Dana's coat gets its own moment, and the cast is allowed to let their hair down for the holiday, which is television shorthand for everything is falling apart, but at least the tailoring is correct. If chemotherapy becomes part of Anita's arc, the hair department will have a choice to make. Either treat it with tasteful realism or repeat the unfortunate habit of leaning into wigs that look more like distracted costume design than compassion. Elsewhere, Chelsea and Madison have potential, but Madison's wide-eyed giddiness reads strangely unserious for someone meant to be a physician. Starstruck is not a credential. And then there is the rest of the carnival, because no soap can survive on one crisis at a time. Dana still has a legal reckoning looming for attempted murder, twice, yet accountability remains on a leisurely schedule. There is appetite for Joey's criminal world to get messier, preferably with an ambitious rival attempting a takeover, because apparently the only thing better than illegal business is a hostile merger. Someone notices a continuity gap about when Ted learned Vernon was not cheating but taking singing lessons, which is exactly the sort of detail a well-run narrative would not force viewers to litigate. The free clinic being named after Leslie is floated as a decision and promptly clocked as questionable judgment, because honoring someone mid-chaos is how bad institutional choices are born. Even the comic relief finds time to grandstand. A scene-stealing, performative flourish from a character derisively dubbed Fake Ironside becomes an unintended highlight, which is both amusing and mildly alarming given everything else happening. In the end, the episode succeeds because the core performances make the pain feel real, even when the plotting insists on sprinting through medical timelines and stapling romance onto grief like a decorative bow. It is moving, it is manipulative, and it is exactly what this genre does best. Take a family to the edge, dress them impeccably, make them kiss at the worst possible moment, and then demand tears, while quietly reminding everyone to get screened. The most unrealistic part of this finale wasn't the cancer storyline. It was how quickly everyone acted like Bill still gets a vote. This week's Beyond the Gates of 2025 closed its first season with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer wrapped in satin. Tears, revelations, suspicious smiles, and enough unresolved tension to qualify as a public utility. Consider it a festive send-off into 2026, because nothing says Happy New Year like inherited cancer risk, romantic sabotage, and a possible snake operating in plain sight. Anita's storyline delivered the emotional center of the finale with brutal efficiency. The moment Anita shared her devastating diagnosis with Danielle and Nicole landed exactly as intended: quiet, human, and gutting. And predictably, there's been hand-wringing from viewers who object to breast cancer appearing in a soap, as if illness is some kind of genre violation. Cancer is real. Families live with it. And if a drama refuses to touch real-life stakes, it isn't protecting anyone. It's just producing glossy nonsense. If the writing was aiming for a reminder about vigilance and self-checks, it succeeded. Naturally, the narrative isn't content to stop at a diagnosis. The BRCA angle is now on the table, and so is the looming possibility of genetic testing threading fear through the Dupree women like a slow, merciless drumbeat. The expectation is clear: this will not be a clean sweep of negative results. Soap opera logic does not permit tidy outcomes, especially when the writers have found a storyline with real weight and real consequences. The DNA testing hints are not decorative, they are a warning label. And while Anita's family rallies, supportive, present, and exactly what a person deserves in a moment like this, the show keeps doing what it does best: staging grief alongside chaos, compassion alongside selfishness, and sincerity alongside people who cannot stop making everything about themselves. Enter Danny, sprinting toward the nearest open door labeled Bill, because apparently the first response to family crisis is to notify a man who no longer needs to be central to anyone's life. The daughters are grown women, yet the instinct is still to run information through Bill first, as if adulthood is a phase, and paternal permission remains a requirement. It is not merely misguided, it's disrespectful. The repeated insistence that Bill must be included in every meaningful beat doesn't read as devotion, it reads as dependency. The consequence is immediate and visible. Andre's face in that moment said everything the script didn't need to. There's a limit to how many times someone can be asked to stand beside a partner while a third party is treated like the true emotional spouse. Danny's fixation is not romantic. It is corrosive. It keeps bruising Andre, and the show knows it, lingering on his reactions, making the tension unavoidable, then daring the audience to pretend it isn't happening. Which is unfortunate, because Andre is positioned to do something rare in this genre: prove the relationship is more than heat and impulse. The pieces are there for him to be steady: shoulder, strength, presence, while Danny faces what may be coming. But this only works if Danny learns the basic skill of not summoning Bill like a ritual every time life gets complicated. Otherwise, the show isn't writing a love story, it's writing a slow-motion breakup with an ex hovering in the doorway. As for Bill and Haley, the New Year's celebration raises the obvious question: what did that look like exactly, and how much of it will matter when the fallout arrives? The series clearly wants Bill's influence to remain a living, breathing problem. Mission accomplished. Elsewhere, the supporting cast continues its important work, fueling speculation and irritating the audience on schedule. Derek and Ashley's dynamic has become an exercise in prolonged awkwardness, made worse by Ashley's extended disappearance. Either that pairing evolves, or it's time to spare everyone and place Derek with someone who doesn't make every interaction feel like a forced rehearsal. Carlton, meanwhile, earns the title he's been auditioning for: untrustworthy. The snake label isn't hyperbole, it's character design. The suspicion of a double life doesn't feel like wild theorizing. It feels like the show planting breadcrumbs with a wink. Then there's Nicole, drifting through the season with the unmistakable aura of concealed information. The confident insistence that a secret exists may not come with proof, but the narrative language is familiar. The pauses, the framing, the too-composed reactions. This is exactly how soaps telegraph that something is being withheld until the most inconvenient moment possible. Ted and Shanice, however, brought the rare gift of forward motion. Sitting on the same side signaled alignment. Finally. Ted also displayed the kind of seasoned screen presence that makes even an empty fork look persuasive, which is arguably the most honest acting compliment available. And yes, watching Ted finally address Looney Leslie the way she deserved was satisfying, though the warning remains obvious. Leslie will not accept defeat quietly, and Shanice is next on the target list. Speaking of Leslie, pairing speculation with Malone is doing its job. Will it become romance, manipulation, or the classic cop and inmate mess that ruins everyone's judgment? The show has options, and none of them are stable. Meanwhile, the episodes sprinkled in lighter notes like punctuation marks between sobs. Joey and Vanessa's pairing remains genuinely enjoyable, even in a season determined to make happiness feel suspicious. The fashion conversation also arrived on cue. Vanessa and Nicole's dresses, the sisters' looks, and the inevitable commentary on a musical performance. Because even in emotional catastrophe, the show understands that glamour is part of the contract. And finally, yes, Andre looked exceptional in his suit. The show knows what it's doing. Even in pain, it will not waste an opportunity for aesthetic precision. By the end, the finale earned its tearjerker label. It was bittersweet, heavy, and, despite the complaints, exactly what serialized drama is supposed to be when it stops pretending life is convenient. Real issues were placed on the page. The characters responded with a mix of love, denial, dysfunction, and tenderness. If everything were peaches and cream, there would be nothing to watch. This season understood that. The only question now is whether certain characters, most notably Danny, will evolve or continue treating emotional growth as optional. Season 1 closed with chills, grief, suspicion, and unresolved fractures. In other words, a proper ending. Welcome to Season 2. They didn't choose New Year's Eve for the diagnosis reveal by accident. They chose it for maximum emotional damage. The episode arrives with the subtlety of a marching band and the emotional restraint of a soap opera doing exactly what it was hired to do. Kenny Lattimore shows up looking impeccably handsome, sounding like a reminder that some people still know how to deliver a classic, and instantly makes the surrounding chaos feel even more chaotic by comparison. Vanessa, meanwhile, looks stunning. Because of course she does. If there is one dependable institution left, it is the wardrobe department understanding the assignment. Then there is Ted. Weak in all the ways that matter, yet reliably entertaining in the way only a man committed to poor judgment can be. Watching him navigate his own mess is less character development and more ongoing demonstration. And Dana remains the kind of conversational detour nobody asked for. Still talking, still being entertained by herself, still being entertained at by everyone else. The question is no longer why the dialogue exists. It is why anyone keeps allowing it to continue. Right on schedule, the Ashley and Derek drama returns, because apparently peace is not permitted within the city limits. Ashley does look stunning, credit where it is due, yet the show insists on pairing beauty with predictability, as if the audience might forget what this storyline does every time it resurfaces. At this point, the only surprise would be if it ended cleanly. Shanice is undeniably pretty, and the Ted and Shanice pairing continues its slow campaign to wear down resistance through sheer exposure. Discomfort turns into reluctant acceptance, not because it is flawlessly written, but because persistence is a strategy. And frankly, the idea of Ted and Nicole reconciling no longer feels essential. Some relationships expire. That is not tragedy, it is maintenance. Still, there is always Leslie hovering like a self-appointed gatekeeper, radiating the belief that if she cannot have Ted, nobody can. An attitude delivered with such commitment, it almost deserves a standing ovation, if not for the collateral damage. Leslie's broader maneuvering is even less subtle. Bringing Joey in as a partner is not just business. It reads like a calculated attempt to jab the Richardson family where it hurts most. With the clinic and campaign optics at stake, the move doubles as an endorsement grenade. Especially with the political implications hanging over Martin Richardson's re-election prospects. The moment Eva carried the idea forward, the outcome was obvious. Accidental sabotage is not a credible genre here. And then the episode shifts into its heavy artillery. Anita's breast cancer diagnosis. The performances land. The acting is strong enough to pull real tears, even from viewers who know precisely how soaps operate. Anita sharing the news with Nicole and Danny hits with genuine weight. Pain portrayed convincingly. Grief rendered without melodrama tipping into parody. The early detection messaging is also handled with welcome clarity, a rare moment where the show manages to educate without lecturing. Still, the timing choice is baffling. New Year's Eve, during celebration, during family togetherness, during the one night people are already emotionally primed, becomes the designated hour for life-altering news. The compassion for Anita is unquestionable, yet the narrative decision remains questionable. It could not wait one more day? After carefully making it through Christmas, the story then selects the loudest, most emotionally crowded evening possible. It is not heartless to notice the contrivance. It is simply paying attention. Through it all, Anita is framed as what she is: a warrior, a survivor, and a pillar. The insistence that she will make it is not denial. It is the show signaling resilience. Dressing her up more often is not a superficial note either. It reads as a deliberate choice to reinforce confidence and dignity at a time when both are under siege. The storyline may be unwanted by some, but its recognition matters. For viewers facing the same reality, the representation can register as solidarity rather than spectacle, especially when the message is clear: nobody is alone. Meanwhile, the show wisely avoids piling betrayal on top of diagnosis. The relief that Vernon is not cheating is more than plot preference. It is basic human decency in storytelling. Discovering infidelity amid cancer news and holidays would not be juicy. It would be cruel. Keeping Anita and Vernon intact preserves them as the power couple they are meant to be, and it spares the audience a misery spiral that would feel punitive rather than dramatic. Elsewhere, Danny's arc offers a rare opportunity for maturity. Andre is right there, offering stability. The smarter move is recognizing what she has and refusing to sabotage it out of misplaced obligation to Bill. Yes, Bill is the father of her child, but fatherhood is not a title preserved by absence and selective involvement. He chose his life. Danny is fully capable of raising her daughters, and their emotional reality already reflects life without him. If there is going to be a reckoning, it should not be managed by Danny's guilt. It should come from the daughters telling Bill exactly what his choices have cost. As a final flourish, Naomi continues dressing like she is headed to the office. Every occasion treated as a work day, because some people interpret festive as a scheduling error. So yes, the episode delivers beauty, repetition, and emotional gut punches in equal measure. It makes questionable timing decisions, leans hard on familiar drama loops, and still manages to produce moments of real impact, largely because the cast commits fully, and because Anita's story, however unwelcome, is handled with enough gravity to matter. The result is a soap doing what soaps do best, exhausting the nerves, rewarding the emotions, and insisting, loudly, that resilience is not optional. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. The problem isn't the couples, it's the writing, manufacturing chaos, and calling it character development. Eva and Isaiah, at least, managed to do the one thing this genre treats as optional: behave like two adults who can consent without a committee meeting. The intimacy was not too soon, simply because it happened promptly. The only scenario where too soon applies is the one where someone is being pressured, performing compliance to avoid losing a relationship, or swallowing discomfort to keep the peace. When both parties are ready, the moral panic can take the night off. Nicole and Carlton, on the other hand, are a master class in how to turn a straightforward pairing into a slow-motion credibility collapse. Carlton's proximity to Ted, friendship, loyalty, history, whatever label is slapped on it, should have been an automatic boundary. Instead, the story insists on testing whether common sense can be worn down through repetition. Add to that Nicole dating two men in less than a month, and what should read as romantic momentum starts to resemble narrative indecision in heels. It is not bustled when the writing cannot decide whether it is building a love triangle or staging a cautionary tale. And then there is Carlton himself, perpetually evasive, frequently absent, and suspiciously difficult to pin down. He bails, he dodges, he withholds, and the question practically writes itself: married, committed elsewhere, or simply allergic to accountability? Nicole's growing irritation is understandable, but it is also predictable. The setup telegraphs that she will eventually learn Carlton is not what she imagined. The New Year's Eve promise practically begs for a letdown, one party expecting romance, the other delivering a couch, a television, and a ball drop that lands like a punchline. Elsewhere, relationships are framed with the subtlety of a siren. Vanessa appears closer to Danny than to Nicole, which is awkward for the best friends narrative that keeps being implied. Vanessa's comfort in escorting is treated as a shock beat rather than a layered choice, as if the writers want scandal without the burden of insight. Meanwhile, Haley gets a reminder that should be printed on a billboard. If plotting Bill's demise, looking like open hostility is not a strategy, it is advertising. The show also flirts with the kind of soap logic that thinks hypocrisy is the same as complexity. Calls for Eva to go to jail for covering up her mother's crimes are delivered with righteous certainty, until the conversation turns to covering for Martin, which somehow becomes excusable despite witnesses and accomplices. And then Jacob enters the chat. He knows his father is crooked, has witnessed wrongdoing, and is a law enforcement officer with an actual legal duty to report crimes. Yet he receives a pass so generous it might as well come with a ribbon. If accountability is selective, it is not morality. It is favoritism dressed up as principle. Even the show's serious storyline choices arrive with whiplash. The Anita Dupree cancer plot gestures at awareness, mammograms, early detection, public health messaging, then escalates into an extremely harsh diagnosis that risks feeling less like advocacy and more like a ratings lever. Layer in the possibility of an Anita impersonator stepping in while treatment occurs, and the line between emotional realism and gimmick becomes uncomfortably thin. If the aim is impact, the execution cannot read like a contingency plan. The larger issue, though, is craft. Characters do not develop. They get repositioned. Consistency is treated as optional, growth as decorative. Eva goes from wanting to take things slowly and be wooed to being intimate almost immediately, with no believable transition, just a switch flipped for convenience. Ted begins with backbone and ends up written like a lapdog. Doug is handled with the kind of careless plotting that invites audiences to direct their frustration at characters rather than at the writers, engineering the mess. The more rational demand is not to hate the cast of names, but to expect coherent arcs earned choices, and writing that does not sabotage its own premises. The repeated emasculation of black male characters only sharpens the critique. It is not a coincidence when it happens as a pattern, and it is not harmless when it shapes how power, competence, and dignity are portrayed. Some threads, admittedly, contain sparks of possibility. Kat is cut from the cloth of classic, polished archetypes, and that kind of confident, bougie boss energy can be entertaining when the writing supports it. Derek may be weighed down by lame plot lines, but the actor's presence suggests a viable pivot. A makeover into a sophisticated model discovered by Pamela could inject humor and rivalry, especially if it triggers jealousy and forces Ashley into something more dynamic than reaction shots. Rick, the casino bartender, casually mentioning a fiancé studying to be a surgeon, is the kind of detail that either foreshadows an incoming character or exists solely to taunt viewers, who still believe throwaway lines mean something. As for Tomas, the moral accounting remains muddled. Eva is dragged while Tomas gets a pass, despite actively cultivating her vulnerability, positioning her as a backup when his situation with Kat was unstable, and repeatedly circling back whenever Kat gave him a reason to run. He presses for cohabitation and a ring with motivations that look suspiciously aligned with workplace positioning rather than devotion. If Eva is condemned for questionable choices, the narrative cannot pretend Tomas is merely romantic. He has been strategic. At least Eva now has a new love interest of her own, which offers a rare opportunity. Let her be more than a receptacle for other people's schemes. And if the show truly wants to wake itself up, there is a simple prescription: import a force of nature. Bringing in a formidable, wealthy, long-lost sister for Ted, cast with the kind of commanding presence that can dominate scenes and reset dynamics, could finally give the surrounding characters something to react to besides their own recycled dilemmas. The story does not need more chaos. It needs better chaos, directed with purpose rather than desperation. Finally, a basic reminder is warranted, because the audience keeps being asked to confuse performance with personhood. These are actors being paid to embody the writing, not real-life villains auditioning for punishment. The stories may hit close to home: cancer, divorce, affairs, hidden children, and still remain constructed entertainment. Viewers are free to dislike characters, but the most productive outrage is reserved for the writing choices that refuse to let anyone evolve. The problem isn't Eva and Isaiah. The problem is the audience's obsession with controlling her. Chelsea moved on 3 weeks after Allison ended things, while actively hunting for dates on apps with anyone willing to show up. Vanessa managed to sleep with an escort while married, then followed that up by sleeping with Joey after their 3rd meeting. Still married, naturally. Yet somehow, Eva hooking up with Isaiah after he arrived on the scene in late September is where moral outrage suddenly finds its backbone. How convenient. For weeks, the chorus demanded Eva have a man of her own. Now that one exists, the same crowd is scandalized that she behaved like an adult with agency. The implication is clear. Eva is allowed happiness only if it arrives on a timetable approved by spectators who treat personal autonomy like a subscription service they can cancel. And no, this is not her mother's storyline. Not everything is hereditary dysfunction. The strangest part is the collective panic over disliking a character. Disapproval is not a crisis. Enjoyment is not a mandate. A functioning audience does not require unanimous emotional obedience. The aggressive policing over who is allowed to be criticized is more unhinged than Leslie on her best day, and that is saying something. Because Leslie, predictably, is incapable of letting a moment pass without inserting herself into it. Eva attempts to dismiss Isaiah, and there she is at the door, ready to pry, provoke, and perform maternal concern like it is a costume she borrows only for public scenes. The way she behaves around Eva's friend is not motherly. It is territorial, invasive, and frankly sickening. She does not nurture, she monitors. Meanwhile, Carlton continues to radiate the kind of something is off energy that requires no evidence, only patience. The suspicion is not random, it is cumulative. The charm feels curated, the intentions feel rehearsed. The fear is not that he is complex, but that he is strategic. Nicole, in particular, is positioned as collateral damage waiting to happen. The hope is that she sees through the performance before she is hurt again, because the pattern is becoming difficult to ignore. If Carlton is playing a longer game, Nicole looks like the most convenient pawn on the board. And then there is the theory that ties the mess together. Carlton working with Leslie, helping rig the DNA test. The motive writes itself, his hatred for Ted, and the desire to injure him indirectly by weaponizing Nicole. It would be less a twist than a confirmation that the quiet ones are rarely quiet for innocent reasons. On the lighter side, there are dangling threads that the narrative seems content to abandon. Nicole dating Greg Vaughn appears to be a dead end, unless the storyline is simply waiting to be revived when the plot needs filler. And the eternal question remains, where is Peaches? Not everything is cynical, though. When the show chooses humanity over hysteria, it lands. Anita and Vernon come across as painfully real. Two people trying to hold themselves together while the world demands they fall apart on schedule. The moment Vernon says it is time to tell the kids hits because it is ordinary, and ordinary is what makes it devastating. The hope is the family can stay intact through New Year's with the looming news, but this genre is not known for rewarding stability. Still, perspective matters. This is a soap, not a courtroom. Some scenes will hit harder than others because the emotions are designed to. That does not justify turning discussion into personal warfare. The actors are role-playing, the characters are engineered. Criticism is fair, cruelty is not. Adults can manage disagreement without obscenity, vulgarity, or performative outrage. As for Eva and Isaiah, whether intimacy came too soon depends entirely on whose rulebook is being enforced this week. The more honest question is why the standard keeps changing depending on who is being judged. The Eva hate is not principled. It is excessive, selective, and exhausting. In short, if chaos were a currency, Leslie and Carlton would be independently wealthy, and Nicole would be the one paying the bill.